Welcome to the Marketing Matchup. Looking forward to this conversation today. We have two super sharp, savvy minds in the world of wealth tech and advisor marketing. Joining us today is Emily Tran, new VP of Marketing at Vanilla, and Abby Domine, who's a Chief Marketing Officer at Flourish. Ladies, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
So let's set the table for our audience for a second. I'd love to hear each of your own personal journeys in marketing. How'd you get here? I love asking this question because very few people who I get a chance to talk to in this show actually dreamt of doing what they're doing today. That was their life goal. So tell me a little bit about your background, where you're coming from, and what you're focused on next. And Abby, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So it's funny, I didn't study to be a marketer. I studied in the liberal arts, so French literature and political science, which I claim I use all the time. But I really started my professional career on the agency side, which, Joe, I know is near and dear to your heart. It's just a great way to learn the basics of the industry, of the business of advertising and marketing, and thinking about different target audiences, what they want, what they're looking for, and to just be able to work on a bunch of brands in a short period of time and understand different perspectives. That led me from New York City, from a big firm on Madison Avenue, over to the West Coast, where I really went client side and did high tech marketing and help some big brands from GE to Apple build brands here on the West Coast, which led me back to the East Coast. Flourish is based in New York, but it was that crossover of finance and technology that really drew me.
Terrific. And Emily, give us a little bit of your backstory.
It's like very similar to Abby, actually. I also ended up in marketing kind of accidentally. I have degrees in English literature and economics. And I've always prided myself on being both like right brain and left brain. But when I graduated school, I did not know what I wanted to do, but I had interest in finance and in retail. And I applied for different jobs in each of those industries into rotational programs. I thought that would give you the most exposure so I can move through different positions in a company. So I ended up working at Morningstar for a few years. I was in their rotational program, and then by accident ended up in marketing as a rotation, and I haven't left since then. And I think that's one of the things I really like about marketing specifically too, is that it's both quantitative and qualitative. And I've stuck in the financial services kind of sector too, because I think it's such an interesting space because there's so many different players. And like when I was in marketing in Morningstar too, like we did B2B marketing, but also B2B2C, and there's like so many different layers and so many things. So I found it very interesting. And then I moved from Morningstar into Practify because I wanted that taste of the startup life. And I really learned a lot during my time there too, how to like grow the marketing function. I got my try at everything. And then now, into leading marketing at Vanilla now.
Well, both of you have an interesting journey in terms of not necessarily aiming to be where you're at today, but you are where you are. And I think one of the things that I found fascinating in looking at both of your backgrounds, I mean, right now you're spending a lot of time focused on an audience, which I think is maybe the most marketed to sub-audience of B2B financial service marketing. Everybody wants financial advisors to pay attention to what they're doing. I don't care if you have an investment product like an ETF, WealthTech, if you have a cash solution, you name it. Financial advisors are in the spotlight. Tell us a little bit about how you approach that. How do you conquer that? How do you get mind share? What is the general approach to marketing to advisors that you think really is sort of your governor, your focal point, your North Star in terms of how you set the table for your day-to-day, month-to-month work reaching out to this audience? Emily, I'd like to start with you. What do you see really helping you connect with that audience?
Well, like you said, everybody's marketing to the same group. And almost at times I feel bad for financial advisors too, because everybody's trying to get their share of their eyeballs for anything. So when I think about marketing to this group, I think a lot about I think about value the most. It's like, can we offer something of value no matter what it is, right? And it's not just fluff. It's not just some words, some buzzwords, or something that looks nice and that kind of stuff too. But I think a lot about value, which is why we're working at Practify and working at Vanilla too. It's like, what can we offer them from a product standpoint? What can we solve for them? Because they only have so much time in a day, right? Both time you're trying to get in front of them, but then also the time that they have to spend with their clients too. So a lot of the marketing and the positioning and messaging stuff comes down to value. And the other part I think about too is about how, even from a marketing trend perspective, our industry is almost always about 5 to 10 years behind the consumer industry a little bit too. And one of the things that's become really prevalent in the last few years, both in this industry that came from the direct to consumer industry, is this idea of really leaning into emotions and connecting and feelings and kind of that like building that emotional connection. And that's the kind of stuff that lasts now for this audience and typically for a lot of marketing too. So I think a combination of like both value and also can we build an emotional connection to make it so that they remember us, right? Because emotions are one of the things that ties up like our memories or makes us remember certain brands, certain things like that. So kind of leaning more into that more emotional side as well.
It's interesting to talk about the emotional side. It's often associated with B2C marketing where you want to have that connection, but people sometimes forget that their business partners also have the same sort of human side to what they do. Abby, you're laughing. What would you add in terms of the advisor audience?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. We sometimes say like the advisors are the hero, right? So we want them to feel like heroes. It's a hard job being an advisor, right? And you have to be quantitative and qualitative. You have to build relationships, but also produce number-based results. But Flourish, and maybe it helps to understand for people who might not know what Flourish is, we are a wealth tech platform that provides solutions that advisors don't easily have access to, but clients are asking for. And so we see ourselves as an engine for growth. And so really, I think growth is organic growth in particular has been a big buzzword. We see lots of inorganic growth, but the nut that everyone's trying to crack is how do we drive organic growth? And so we really look at the services that we provide to advisors and say, how did they help you grow your firm organically? And we see that as really a key way of doing it. So we're not trying to just grow for the sake of growth on our own side, but we're trying to show advisors how they can grow. And so as an example, our flagship product, Flourish Cash, is a held away cash solution for advisors. So when they get a client who comes in front of them and says, hey, what do I do with my emergency money? Not the portfolio cash, but the money they want to hold on their own, feel like is their own. Advisors historically have said, hey, I can look up some rates for you, and off you go and do it. And so they're giving that advice, but they have no way to implement it. And when the advisors give clients an invite to Flourish Cash, those clients can open a Flourish Cash account. They get higher FDIC, they get a competitive yield, and the advisor can still see that money. They still know where it is. And clients can send referrals to their advisor through Flourish Cash. So we sent 2,800 referrals to advisors last year. So that is their clients saying, hey, I love Flourish Cash and I want my mom to have an account, and my next door neighbor wants an account, and the person I go golfing with wants an account. And that gives those advisors this great way to acquire new clients very organically, very easily. It's not them out seeking that; it's their existing happy clients coming to them and saying, "Oh, you should talk to my friend."
Well, that's awesome, Abby, and I think it actually dovetails back with what Emily said before, having to bring value to the advisor, right? And in your case, you're talking about referrals. Every advisor wants new business, wants new connections. Be able to have that be an outgrowth of what you're doing, obviously, is an example of that value that they're looking for when it comes to these third-party providers coming in, whether it's a tech solution or investment solution or otherwise. And so when you go through that process, one of my big contentions has always been, and again, following along the theme of bringing value to advisors are throwing so much at them from the tech landscape. I'm sure we've all seen the studies about how much tech goes underutilized or unutilized. There's a lot of so too much going on in some cases for advisors, but to get them to actually implement Practify, Vanilla, Flourish, any one of these things, they want to make sure it fits in with what they're doing. Emily, what's like the biggest stumbling block you've seen in terms of the marketing connection to actual user connection?
I think from a marketing side too, like we spend a lot of time marketing to the decision maker, but they're not necessarily the end user at the end of the day too. So there's also remembering that you have to do marketing to the end user because they're the ones who actually will be in there day in and day out. And this is even we find this a lot too in like for firms, all firms struggle with adoption for technology, right? Because advisors are not technologists. They're not meant to this is not what they don't want to spend all their days in a million different tools, and they have a new tool they have to learn, all that stuff like that too. But we've also seen this a lot for a lot of firms when they're going out to buy technology. That advisor doesn't have a seat at the table when they go to make that decision, right? So they're making a decision for the firm, and the advisor who's going to be the end user often isn't part of that decision unless they're in a firm where they're wearing multiple hats, that kind of stuff. So having the advisor be part of the decision is also a really important thing. And then from a marketing side, it's like we need to market to the end user, and same thing about the value. Like, what's the value to the end user? Not necessarily to like the business and decision maker, but what's the end value to the user? So when I was at Practify, it's like, how can we tell them and show them that they're going to save time in their day by using us or by integrating this or doing XYZ thing. And once they see that value, they can use it. But another important part too is also around education. There's so much technology, but a lot of it doesn't come with good support resources or even training material that's multifaceted, both digital and there's reading and there's videos, that kind of stuff, like interactive educational content, which is that's also another thing that's kind of lacking in this industry too, is a little bit about like how do you actually build training material that fits all different types of style of learning so you can actually help facilitate better adoption in a lot of these firms.
And Abby, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think one of our core internal values at Flourish is win on experience. And so we really believe that the secret to getting advisors to adopt something new and to not just use it once or twice, but to make it part of their standard process is to make the experience so beautiful that they don't think of it as using a difficult third-party technology or something they have to learn how to use. That and also same thing goes for their clients, right? So if you have a client, we have an amazing support team. They answer the phone in under 30 seconds. They're real humans. They're based in the United States. And so they handle the advisors and their clients the same way that advisors would manage their clients. So if you have a client who's not great with technology, maybe one of those not so young clients, and they want to get on the phone with our support team, they will walk them through step by step with the most patience. It's amazing. Click here to do this, click here to do that. And so we really see winning on experience as being critical to getting advisors, not just to try it once, but to adopt it as part of their practices.
And I love that, Abby. And you talk about winning on experience, which actually leads into another question I had, which is, when you think about what advisors want, forget about the actual solution for a second. When they think about whether they're choosing to use a platform like yours or competitors or, a CRM platform or whatever it might be, and what are the things they're actually looking for in the partner? Like the marketing experience has to lead into the customer experience, right? And so what are some of the things they want to see in the marketing? What are some of the things in the implementation process you think help seal the deal from being aware of who you are and what you're bringing to actually being able to execute and feeling like the advisor is winning by partnering with you?
Yeah. So let's see, lots of things. We provide them with the marketing materials they need to tell their clients about Flourish. So we have, co-branded fact sheets. They can co-brand the whole experience. So when someone logs in, it looks like Joe is inviting me to Flourish instead of Flourish inviting me to Flourish. And then sort of throughout the process, the emails that they get include the name of the advisor and things like that. So the advisor knows that every step is managed and feels like it's connected to the invitation that they're providing. And so all the way through, it's reinforcing this is really coming from your advisor. This is not some random third party that you've never heard of, but it's a real thing that your advisor has really spent some time thinking about and wants you to be a part of and sees value in it for you. And we also, the numbers don't lie, right? So if you take a $200,000 account and you pay next to nothing, which is what the standard bank is paying on a savings account, a Flourish account is earning a significant amount more than that. And I'll get in trouble if I name specific numbers, but sometimes we do the math for people and say, here's how much interest you earn on that. And maybe that's, that $200,000 is earning a few hundred, 800 or 900 in a regular account, but a Flourish account, it might be earning in the thousands. And that's a real difference over the course of a year. What can you do with that money, that $8,000, $9,000, $10,000? How do you want to spend that? That really, it does the math, and it helps people think about where they have assets that aren't performing, aren't doing what they should be doing.
So, Emily, going back to something Abby said earlier in her response, she was more or less saying the advisors want to look good by working with you. They want their jobs to be done easier. Like, react to that. Like, when you visualize marketing and connecting with the advisor audience, how much is that true in terms of where your solutions fit in with them?
Yeah, so that's very true. Well, one thing was like ease of use, like what Abby's talking about, like things that are like very beautifully designed, intuitively designed, like ease of use and being able to see like, oh, I can get to this in very few clicks, or I could do this very easily is very appealing for advisors. And about the other part too is like the use cases, like being able to actually show like this advisor used this in this way, and this is what they got out of it. I've also, I don't know, I've said this in other things too, but like this is a very relationship heavy like industry too. It's about who you know and about the examples you can provide. So if you've had like other advisors who've used this and being able to show those use cases of like, oh, this type firm that's similar to yours, similar size, similar number of advisors, this is how they actually used Flourish, or this is how they use Vanilla, or this is how they use Practify, whatever it is. We see that use cases are always very compelling because that's how they actually concretely could see how this could impact them from a day-to-day basis. Because if you just talk around it and you're like, oh, you could possibly do this, possibly do that, they're not sold on it without there being an actual like, this is the real firm that used it, and this is the real advisor that used this, and this is what they got out of this. So I think that's like one of the biggest parts of the marketing part of this is being able to show those use cases and those solid examples of how advisors have gotten value out of XYZ thing.
It's interesting. I think I've heard this expression used many times in the advisor industry. A lot of advisors want to be first to be second, where they want to see someone else have success with before they go, right? So they want to, but at the same time, they're looking for that edge. And I think it's really a challenge for advisors when they hear, again, inundated with solicitations from wealth tech providers, from investment providers, et cetera, and they come and say, well, how do I sort through and figure out what's going to make my business run better? How do I go through and figure out what my clients are going to appreciate? How is it going to make my workflow and productivity better? And all these things, and a lot comes at them. And I think part of the faux pas I've seen in marketing, and I'm curious to see what your response is, a lot of times the information coming at them makes it more complicated for them to understand. I think you both talked about use cases a little bit in terms of how the offerings shape up. Let's turn this around for a second. If we think about the advisor wanting some of these solutions to help them grow, when you think about the marketing to them and thinking about that process, there's so much focus on organic growth in the industry for financial advisors, wealth management firms. How does the wealth tech, the external resources offered to them, investment products, and the marketing around it influence that? Like, how do you see your roles in terms of pointing towards that solving for organic growth issue? I'm curious, Emily, like you've been in a couple different places. Like, when you look at that, like what are the drivers there when you think about how wealth tech solutions can support the organic growth discussion? How do you frame that with advisors when they're thinking about adoption?
Yeah, so going back to like the whole like use cases, like examples thing, because we talk about organic growth. I've seen so many articles on organic growth, and it could be very high level and kind of nebulous. Where you're like, oh yeah, just like grow your business, do this thing. But I can actually refer back to Schwab does their benchmarking study every single year, right? And they look at the sources of organic growth. So if you drill down to that level of like, okay, how are they getting organic growth? It's either through client referrals, they're going to do organic marketing, or they have existing client growth, right? So actually that last one, I feel like there hasn't been a lot of talk about that. Everyone wants new logos, they want new clients, but you have to look at the industry, and every single advisory firm is going after the ultra high net worth, right? So you're looking at like thousands of firms going after the same sliver of people who hold these assets. And a lot of the firms aren't looking at their internal, like, oh, you have existing clients who might have held away cash, might have held away assets that you don't know about, right? And that was actually one of the areas I think in that study too, that said like that's an area for growth for a lot of firms, or at least the highest performing firms do a really great job at growing existing client assets, but the rest of the industry does not do a good job at that. So you think about marketing for organic growth, again, it's like having the solid examples of, okay, it's like, here's how we help you do that, right? If you're looking at growing organically, you can only do it through referrals. You can only do it through existing client growth or through just getting new clients, right? But if we hone on one of the examples, like growing existing clients' assets, here's how XYZ thing does that. So when I was at Practify, it was like, okay, here's how we help you track all the services that you deliver for these clients, and here are the services you might be missing, right? You should be doing some tax planning with them, or you should be doing some, I don't know, like opening 529s for their kids and all that kind of stuff too. So it's like, how do we actually help you do that specific thing? And here are some examples of how we can help you grow your existing client assets. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and it's one of the reasons that Flourish was happy to integrate with Practify, among others, because we think having visibility to those outside assets is important, and we really look at all the ways that people are squirreling away money, and one of our favorite things is to have advisors come to us and say, we know where all of our client assets are, and we say, well, okay, sure, but invite them to Flourish and see what happens. And the number of advisors who come back and say, it turns out they had this whole other account that they weren't talking about because they didn't want to tell us about it when they first joined, because they didn't quite fully trust us yet. And then they thought it would be awkward to tell us that they actually have $500,000 sitting somewhere. And it's really that we hear that all the time. And so it's as a way to grow that share of wallet, right? And to uncover assets and bring them into your orbit and have a conversation that says, hey, we agreed your emergency fund was going to be $100,000 and you have 300. Like, let's move that over to the portfolio. We send hundreds of millions of dollars to the portfolio. And that's how, very specifically, that's, assets are being discovered through that kind of held away cash. And then we also have an annuities platform. And there's a lot of clients out there. Annuities are having a gangbuster decade, basically, and growing like crazy. And a lot of clients own an annuity, have inherited annuity, have one kind of sitting around, and advisors don't know what to do with them, right? They're not licensed. They don't know the market well. They don't understand them. And at Flourish, we say, look, don't worry about that. You don't need the license. We hold the license. We have a set of staff members who can help you understand, what's happening with this annuity. How can we bring it into your orbit, make it a billable asset, convert it to something that matches a client's current investment portfolio needs. And if you take, annuities are often sold in the six-figure range, and you take that on a $1 to $2 million client with a small six-figure addition, that's a huge percentage growth in the portfolio, really just by having a service to do that, right? If you're just sort of sitting there saying, like, I do portfolio management, and then I kind of give advice on other things, but I don't touch them, you're really missing out on the opportunity to be a holistic advisor and implement holistically.
Well, and I guess a big challenge, obviously, when you're not, you talk about bringing it under the tent for advisors. I mean, it's a chance for them to influence positively what's going on with the client. It's also, again, a chance for them, as you say, bill and increase more revenue for themselves when you're touching more of these things. And I think a big part of the marketing faux pas I've seen is that a lot of times there isn't a direct connection to the client experience with advisors when they're talking about. They speak it through the prism of the advisor benefits. And so that's one of the things that I'm curious with the two of you, when you go through your work, when you think about how much of your time is thought about what the advisor gets out of your delivery versus what they should be thinking about in terms of what does it do to improve the client experience with them, right? Because again, obviously, great client experience, more likely you're going to get more referrals, grow their business, which makes them very happy proponents of whatever tools they're using to get that done, right? And so, Emily, you have a perspective both on the CRM side and now newly with Vanilla. I'm curious to see, like, what does that messaging look like? How do you spend that time in the process conceiving how your offerings get teed up to think about both the advantage for the advisor as well as the end client messaging?
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like a lot of the benefits ultimately for advisors end up benefiting the clients too. So sometimes it feels like it can be a really long arrow to draw to be like, okay, if we do this for you, this is what's going to happen for the experience. But ultimately, all the things that we do, even from my time at Practify too, about like being more efficient, right? So being more efficient means you save more time, which means now you have more time to spend building client relationships or building an experience. Or if you do a better job at, centralizing client inquiries, that kind of stuff like that too, it's a better experience for clients as well. We do ultimately, like, that's the end, like the end-to-end, not the end-to-end target, but because advisors inherently understand that, like, if we improve the client experience for their clients, that's always a good thing for them. Like, they never want to be delivering a bad client experience. They never want to have, their own clients be upset with them or not having a smooth experience with them altogether. So I think from a messaging standpoint, like, we always keep the client experience at the end of the day as like a main benefit for them. Ultimately, everything connects into that. And I think we try to weave that into all the things into all the messaging that we do. And I think it's inherently understood too. That's like, if this is good for you, it's going to be good for your clients.
And then Abby, what would you add to that in terms of thinking about B2C as well as B2B in the messaging?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely see ourselves as a B2B2C, but we take a light touch in terms of how much we talk to clients. So we know that advisors are really particular about that client relationship, and so Emily, I don't know how much at Vanilla there's kind of how much clients know that they're talking to Vanilla or dealing with Vanilla. At Flourish, we try to be sure that we're not stepping on the advisor's toes. We're not encouraging people people, for instance, to put money in the Flourish account instead of in the portfolio. Like we're not competing with ourselves, right? And so we take a light touch. We support the advisor and make sure that there's always a through line that says, this is what you get, this is what your clients get, this is the email that they're going to get tomorrow, or the message at least that they're going to get tomorrow, and some of those kind of things, because we know that they consider those relationships to be the most important in their business, and so we do try to respect that. At the same time, we try to make sure that clients know what they can do. For example, hey, business accounts, right? You can open a business account. A lot of advisors aren't really advising on their clients' businesses, but I was talking to a client, an advisor recently, who said, oh, we introduced and told our clients about the business accounts, and it just caught on like wildfire. That was her exact quote. And it was great to know that there was an opportunity that we had sort of let clients know about it. And she was amazed at how fast it caught on and how it developed the relationship. So there's always kind of a line that we're drawing, but yeah, the advisors never want to do. The first thing we see advisors do is invite themselves to Flourish every time. Nearly every time. Advisors open the account using their personal email. They walk through the process. They test it. They make sure that it's client friendly before they send a single invite outside their walls. Yeah.
You certainly would hope that, right? It's the, are you going to eat your own cooking, right? So let's move on to something else for a second. I think I have the perspective of having worked with advisors for 23 years and seeing the evolution of the industry, the RIA space grow up and things like that. I would say, particularly in the last 5 years since the pandemic, that there's two areas that are obvious for marketers that have really blossomed to a new level in terms of opportunity because of an underlying what I would call psychological phenomenon, which is this. I think advisors want more interpersonal connection and sense of community more than ever. Our LinkedIn feeds are filled with these points where there's people getting together, industry events. Maybe it's something thrown on, an event put on by a partner like an asset management firm hosting an event or a WealthTech firm hosting an event, and they're there or whatever it might be. But they love that. There's this sense of connection there. At the same time, they also like partner marketing, where they like to promote the fact that ABC firm has chosen whatever WealthTech to be as their enterprise solution for solving for cash or for CRM or whatever it might be. And so you see these things come up, which leads me to the point where I feel like in looking at the market that two of maybe the three most impactful ways for marketing, if you're in the world of WealthTech, revolve around events and with partner marketing. And I will put those two alongside digital advertising as maybe my top three right now in terms of connecting. I'd love for the two of you to react to that. Like, do you agree, disagree? Where does that fall in your mind in terms of areas of opportunity and the read on sort of the personality of the evolving world of advisors? Emily, you were nodding along there a little bit. I'll give you the first swipe at this.
I was going to say, I think I agree with you about the areas of opportunity being in the events and in the partner side, because you're correct about the desire for community and that desire, like I mentioned before, that desire for like personal connection and relationships, not just with their own clients, but with each other, with other advisors, with their partner, with their technology providers. That all of it is all relationship based. I think even for events too, we've seen a big evolution in that in terms of even people expecting more out of events now than there used to be. Just take Future Proof, for example, right? They also, fantastic marketing. I'm going to give them that credit too. They have great marketing. They're all about the experience, but they've also made the industry realize that they need to step up their game too from an event standpoint, right? Because all of that, like the way that they structure their event is also very relationship and community based, and the way that they handle social media, the way that they do promotions, the way that the experiences they curate, it's all very like community and like relationship based. So I think there's more desires for those type of events at the large scale. There's also a desire for even smaller scale. Like we've had like success doing kind of even dinners or smaller events alongside partners too. So we'll do it with other technology partners as well, because if we're all going after the same audience and we're not, directly competing with each other, like why not also work together to build our own community of technology partners, and then also connect and build relationships with the same like advisors that we're all targeting anyway. So I think the like event part is super, super important, and the community part is also, I think definitely accelerated because post-COVID, when we're all isolated, that we all want more of that community and more of that connection.
And Abby, what's your take on all of that?
Yeah, events are a huge sleeve. I mean, I think we see kind of the three pillars as events, digital, and thought leadership, which sort of falls right into your camp, and sort of that PR side. But we have more than, I think, tripled our events in the last 3 years. I mean, each time we go, we test a few and we go back to a few, and one of the things we've noticed, because we want to talk to senior leaders at the big firms, is that they're often showing up at events and leaving the office because they want to talk to smaller firms, right? And so even though they may not actually want to hear from Flourish at that moment after they've sat on a panel about M&A, we find that there's more access than there was 2 or 3 years ago, even just coming out of COVID. So we love events, and then we also use them to talk to existing clients or advisors, I should say, not end clients, but existing firms that we work with. And I just love going to events and talking to the advisors. And sometimes I can stand there and there's one advisor that works with Flourish and one that doesn't, and it's like, what you tell them, like, why am I telling you what we do when this person has already used Flourish? Not that long ago, I was at a big aggregator and I came in on the red eye. It was their event, and I came in on the red eye and I sat down at breakfast, and someone across the table looked at my badge and said, "Oh, Flourish, we love Flourish." And the people next to me said, "What does Flourish do?" And I was like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I need my I need a little coffee here. And so the person across the table talked about what Flourish does. And it was so great to just sit there and hear it directly from an advisor. And so that opportunity, when you have a few people at the booth and some use your service, and I'm sure Emily has the same experience, and you get to deepen your connection with your existing firms, those firms talk to other firms. It's that real world case study. So we love it. And I know Emily as a partner, right? So Flourish has an integration with Practify from her prior life. And so on that partnership sleeve, anyone who works together in the ecosphere of wealth tech solutions and doesn't compete, I think linking arms is a much better way to get attention and to demonstrate to advisors how they can make this set of solutions work in their real world, is a key winner. And you share the cost, right? So marketing has a cost, and if everyone's splitting the tab for whatever the activity is, that just helps up the ROI on the cost per head count and that kind of thing. So we love it.
So let's talk about an area that's always fun to dive into, which is, what are the most overlooked or underrated parts of the marketing stack that your firms have been involved with, or you've just seen that people overlook? Where do you see the areas ripest for firms like yours, as well as potentially the firms you're talking to, like advisors, to better utilize? Are there any areas that you feel like are particularly worth pointing out? Abby, I'll start with you this time.
Sure. I'll go sort of underrated. I think one of the things that I think a lot of places don't do because they just don't think about it is connecting their Google ads and leads with their CRM. And so we're all targeting kind of niche audiences, advisors, clients, specific types of people. So if I were an advisor looking to advertise, I would also do this, which is that you're sourcing leads from Google, you're putting ads out there on Google, but are you telling Google if they are good leads or just form fills, right? They're for whatever reason, they're totally outside your target market. You're throwing it in the trash as soon as the quote unquote lead comes across. So we sometimes say that's not a lead, that's a form fill. And Google allows you to send that data back, right? So you can close the loop with Google, you can report back to them, and the data is hashed for privacy. So you can send back, that was a disqualified, right? We didn't like that. And likewise, you can send them, that was a lead, like that's going forward in our sales pipeline. And then you turn the algorithm on your side, right? So then the algorithm is working for you. You're telling Google, this was what I want. Give me more people like that. And it's so much better than just Google sort of sending you reports that are like, hey, we generated 80 leads for you this month. And you say, actually, it was only 8 leads. But how do they know that, right? And so
Sure.
when you do it in a programmatic way, I think it's an underrated magical touch for marketers to turn those Google form fills into leads and to spend their money on Google so much more wisely.
And if you think it's underutilized on the wealth tech provider side, I guarantee you the advisors you're talking to don't do that at all. We see time and time again, they come in, there's way more meat on the bone than they're taking advantage of in terms of the connectivity with Google and making sure that their digital efforts line up with what else they have going on. Emily, what would you say is either overlooked in the marketing stack or underrated, underutilized?
This is for us as wealth tech marketers, or just for advisors too?
Whatever way you want to go. That's great.
Oh, I don't know. I think when I was thinking about this, like anything that's overrated, I think that's disconnected. If you get any tool and it doesn't connect into something else, and you have to go into that log into that platform separately, it's not gonna like just like advisors too, like marketing. We can have a million tools, and the ideal situation is that all these things either feed into like our own central CRM. Like we use HubSpot back in Practify. Like everything has to feed back in there, so we connect Google Analytics, Google Ads, LinkedIn ads, everything is connected in there because we need to know all the data and look at lead quality, right? So if you get any tool where you cannot connect it into any sort of CRM, it's going to be underutilized and also then become overrated too, even though no matter what value you think you're going to get out of it. And then when I think about underrated tools, I'm a big like project manager type person. I think people don't talk a lot about like project management tools, especially for marketing, because there's so many. Like people always talk about, oh, marketing, like they make things look pretty, but we have so many different types of projects, right? And they all involve like so many stakeholders or so many like design, creative, all these like steps. It's very process and step intensive. And if you don't have the right tool from a marketing side in terms of managing all that project work, whether it's like Monday.com or Asana or whatever those tools are, you can really lose the plot of like what you're working on, and also things slip through the cracks and all that stuff too. I don't ever hear a lot about project management tools, but I feel like that's one where I was like, if you don't have one, you should definitely have one, whether even for advisory firms or whatever too. If you're doing a lot of varied work, like you definitely need some sort of project management tool. And it just makes things so much easier from like an organization standpoint, a process standpoint, and even a standardization standpoint too. But yeah, I'm a big project management kind of person.
Emily, I love that. We're an Asana shop and we're also a HubSpot shop ourselves. That's our preferred. We're not a value-added reseller or anything like that, but those are our preferred tools to work with, both for ourselves and with client engagements, because it keeps everyone on schedule. I think my perception is that one of the biggest stumbling blocks for marketing and PR and any general non-sales end of the growth function, a lot of times they get deprioritized or people lose track of what's next if they don't have a project management. I call them mutual accountability tools, right? So you make sure, like as an agency working with a client, we want to make sure no balls get dropped. If you're not using it internally for your own team or in collaboration with your partners, it's obviously it's a miss. But I love that. I love that those are areas of focus there. And so when we look at the other side of the equation, there's a lot of stuff people are chasing that maybe are overrated or haven't fully actualized yet. And I've heard people roll their eyes at more complicated than they need to be platforms like Salesforce, for example. People not necessarily understanding how to wrangle AI effectively in their marketing efforts. What are the next challenges you see for marketers in terms of getting to the next level? What things should be swept away? Is there sort of being overrated? Where are the opportunities where you think should be, maybe there needs to be more cultivation done for wealth tech firms and their audiences to make the use of? Curious to see what reactions you have to that. Is there any areas to exploit that maybe are new frontiers you want to talk about? Abby, you're nodding along. You seem like you have something on this one.
Yeah, well, we just talked about maximizing your Google spend, but I think when we look forward, it's what's happening to Google as a platform for driving attention, and how do we start creating marketing that's designed for LLMs instead of for simple search terms, right? And so there was a recent study that showed that some of the traditional content marketers who are just constantly creating marketing that creates clicks, that drives into their funnels, are seeing just the AI summaries in Google have dropped their click-throughs by 80% in some cases. 60, I think, was more the standard, but huge drop-offs in that sort of, hey, you produce content, people click through, they convert into leads and move into your funnel. That model is dying, and so now we don't really know how to advertise to an LLM yet, right? You can't buy keywords on ChatGPT or any of those, and so creating the frameworks that allow us to make sure we are appearing in the search results, and that's tricky for people who are targeting RIAs because it's it's tricky on Google because nobody says, I would like a cash management solution built exclusively for RIAs, right? No one has ever searched for that. But I think in ChatGPT, they might have that conversation, right? That's more of I'm an RIA and I'm looking for a cash management solution that I can offer to my clients. So how do I make sure that Flourish appears as the first example in that answer? That's trickier. There's not a really well-defined playbook for that. So we're working on that, and we're trying to figure out how to benchmark it even, because different people asking different questions get different answers. And so that, I think, when you think about what's kind of coming up, I think that's one piece of the AI story that I think it's going to be interesting, and interesting for advisors who are trying to market their firm. Like, how do you make sure when someone says, I'm a 55-year-old, planning to retire in 5 years, and I need an advisor in my area who specializes in dentists. How do you get your firm showing up at the top of that list? I think that's one that we're all going to be playing with. I would love someone to send me the playbook for that, because we're in the trial.
Yeah, we've had a lot of internal discussions too about not like the death of SEO, but like it's dying, right? That whole the typical content marketing for search engine is like sort of it's on its decline. And then how do you write or create content that fits the link, like the LLMs, so that your content surface is up first? I also love the playbook for that. I don't know the answers to that one either. I've been asked that too, and I'm like, I'm not sure about that one just yet. The other area, I think that's another, I don't like the area for exploitation, but I think like another growing trend too. As I mentioned before about how our industry sometimes is a few years behind the direct-to-consumer industry, it's also just like the influencer marketing and the rise of individual created content versus like company created content. I can't remember, I was reading an article too, I think either earlier this week or somewhere, about how a lot of like even consumer trust from direct consumer, even like B2B too, like these types of consumers, they build a lot of more trust with that individual rather than the actual company. So obviously from a marketing side, we post content from company, LinkedIn pages, company accounts, stuff like that. But that's also almost like a dying trend too, where they want to see content from individual like creators. So it's also that next step of like, whether you're marketing as a WealthTech firm or you're marketing as a advisory firm too, it's like looking beyond your leadership or your CEO or that one thought leader, and actually having multiple, like a full team of people, or at least how do you turn people internally into those individual content creators, or like for them to help also carry out the brand or carry out their messaging and that kind of stuff too. So I think there's also been like a rise of wanting to see more of that like individually created content. So then how do we as marketers identify more individuals within our companies to be those like creators for us too?
Well, and the people need to be the brand, and the brand needs to be the people, and they got to be synonymous in a lot of ways. And you have to find ways to incorporate those faces of the firm in a way they're all connected to the mothership, as it were. And it's a challenge, right? Because there's a defined consumer preference of working with people they know and trust, and it's not just financial services; it's beyond that. I think we'll see more of that, and the user-generated content, whether it shows up in reviews or testimonials or case studies, however you want to call it. I think it's going to be more and more imperative that wealth management firms, wealth tech providers, asset managers find ways to incorporate that into their marketing. So good points. So we've reached the point of our podcast where you each get your parting shot. One piece of advice you have to fellow marketers, observations you have, any trends or things that we didn't cover you want to point at, with your chance to leave us with something smart, witty, funny. You can have a prediction, a look back, anything you want to leave us with. And Abby, I'm going to ask you to go first. What's your parting shot for us today?
Oh, well, I think I'm going to circle back to my point earlier that if you are an advisor or a wealth tech firm who is spending money advertising on Google, make sure you're telling Google when it does a good job, right? Give it the feedback that it needs. Spend your money wisely, spend your time wisely, and see the fruits of that. See that multiply quickly for you.
Awesome. And Emily?
Pressure you put on there. This is very basic, but I always follow this too. It's like, make it about the customer. So I think when I see a lot of marketing, sometimes people look internally and they're like, oh, I want to, show our value, or I want to talk more about Practify, about Flourish, about Vanilla, whatever it is. But people lose sight of the fact that who the end buyer is sometimes, because they're so focused on themselves, whether this is for wealth tech firms or for advisory firms. But like, make it about the customer. Make sure you know them very well, not just generally, but like you know them very, very well. And that you're speaking to the things that matter to them. That's not rocket science, but I think people forget that.
Well, I appreciate both of you taking time today. You filled us with a lot of great insights and perspective. Again, Abby Domine, Chief Marketing Officer at Flourish, thank you so much for joining us. Emily Tran, new VP at Vanilla. Appreciate you taking time to be part of the show. We look forward to seeing you out on the circuit, everybody.
It was a pleasure. Nice to see you, Emily.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys too.
Thanks for listening to Marketing Matchup, a production of Gregory. If you like what you heard, please listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.